Now, when you put the politics aside, you are left with the fact that the taxpayer almost was defrauded over 800 million shillings. But before we get to this interview with some IT experts who will explain just how is that possible, especially considering that IFMIS was recently implemented, let's go to our big Q. Our question tonight is, do you support calls for NY Guru to quit over the NYS saga? Give us your thoughts on that, and you can do so by sending an SMS to 22155. Once again, the question is, do you support calls for NY Guru to quit over the NYS saga? You can also tweet us at KTN News KE and at Kachungira. We'll take a look at some of your opinions later on. But let's get back to that discussion about this 826 million shilling fraud at NYS that was recently discovered. And in studio with me, I'm joined by Kennedy Kachwana, and he is an information systems analyst, and Collins Odwo, who's the head of cybercrime at iLab Africa, Strathmore University. Thank you for coming, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Now, I think if you get too complex, he's a technology writer, so he'll interpret what you're saying. But let's start with this, yes? Is this an internal job or an external job? Because there's still some debate about that. We're not sure whether this 826 million, you know, and this fraud around it was something that was done in-house, or is it possible that a hacker came from outside and penetrated the system? How is this possible?
From my own point of view, this one looks more of a collusion, an internal thing that was just organized, and is ideally something that has been going on for quite some time. Now, most of these cybersecurity attacks or attacks that are propagated with hackers are done with help of an individual within the organization, because we believe, and I know, that there are those external attacks that can be sent, yes, and there are malicious people out there. But looking into how this whole scenario has been playing or has been coming along, I can for sure tell you that this is an internal thing, an insider job.
So what specific signposts are you noticing that say this is an insider's job?
Look at how approval had been done until it reached into that level that now it reached to the minister, the cabinet secretary, for us to discover. Then there is the element of approvals that had to be done. If you look into IFMIS system and how it works, is that there is the segregation of data. They have been segregated in different areas ideally. So there was that element of ideally approvals. Now, what might have done, or what must something that might have occurred ideally, is that maybe this hacker or someone just inside the IT department might have had installed what we call keylogger. Keylogger is ideally a software that you can use to capture someone's password ideally. So he might have just installed it into the system with the help of some individuals to approve payments ideally.
But either way, it needed some help from the inside.
It needed some help from
Kennedy,
the inside.
do you agree with this?
Yes, basically, because some time back the government got it off from the public. So now you can only access it within the government network.
So no one outside the government network can access IFMIS?
Well, that's still possible, but the way it's now, it's highly that the access is within the government. And of course, password, one of the things that I realized when it was being launched is that it didn't have two-factor authentication, meaning that, you know, the way when you go to ATM, you have the ATM card and then you have the password. So you have two things to try to authenticate who you are.
Okay.
So the system doesn't have something close to that. So it's just password, you go in. And that is shocking for a system that I assume we are paying a lot of money for.
So is this a major flaw in the system?
Yeah, for that big system, we expect that to be considered from the beginning. So when it was launched, it didn't have. Maybe now, I'm not sure, but due to the way that information is coming up, that somebody stole the password and able to do that, it means it still doesn't have that two-factor authentication.
But in terms of just how much money passes through this system, do you feel that there are enough levels of security from what you know? I'll start with you.
Yes, actually, when you look at that system, so many people, it goes through many steps, and so many people have to approve it. So for it to go that far, I guess somebody had to compromise a number of people to go that far. But also that possibility that the master login details was the one being used, meaning that somebody who has bigger access to the system, probably, so that he is able to, approve different level. Highly unlikely, but that one could be also a factor.
All right, Collins, I think you want to say something about
yes,
that.
I want to say something. The system might be vulnerable, but people who operate the system are slightly more vulnerable than that. You might have a secure system, but if your people are not well trained, if they don't have the right skills, and if you can perform, for example, a social engineering attack on them, you can easily get access into the system. So this is one of the things that might have happened ideally, a social engineering attack where from a hacker's point of view, I'd send you an email that has a malicious link, and when you open that email, then I can steal your password and all that. So it all rolls down into awareness and training and the people who operate IFMIS. And then apart from that, the system might be vulnerable if it is not well patched. I mean, if it is not upgraded. That means that the people who are operating this system, they might forget simple things. So what the government needs to do is to perform a penetration testing in all the government systems, because trust me, most of them are vulnerable.
Okay, well, clearly a lot of things that need to be looked at. But let's talk about, and you mentioned to me that you're an ethical hacker.
Yes.
Emphasis on ethical, of course.
Yes.
So in terms of finding out what went wrong or who was compromised, is that possible, and how can it be done? Can we catch where this 826 million went wrong?
It is very, very possible. What we need to do is just to do a computer investigation, ideally, and we need to do what is referred to as a chain of custody, whereby we'll be able to link the individual who it's actually possible to get the individual, the IP address that was used. I believe that I know that the government right now is working with the cybercrime unit to find the perpetrators. So it is very, very possible.
Okay.
Right.
And do you agree as well?
Yeah, it's possible. Sometimes it's the will, which probably not there. But if they want to know who...
So you're saying that absolutely it is very, very possible to find out exactly who compromised the system?
Because the way that system is, even when you are doing it, there are so many people who can see what others are doing within the chain of command. So basically, when they go backward and try to see this transaction was initiated from which point, and that's really possible. So the question is, when you say your password was stolen, so now that's now where the
yes, because actually the new senior deputy director, that's General Gedo Harake, did say that his IFMIS password was stolen.
Yes.
What happens in such a situation? Can you prove that his password was stolen? How does that work?
It is possible to prove that his password was stolen, but then now when you get into the court, it will be very difficult in a way. But even if the IP address, for example, that was used, it was forged or spoofed, ideally, it is still possible to do that. Now, what they need to do is they need to seek experts and people who have the right skills, ideally, to help them out, find out these perpetrators. Right.
Okay.
And also this thing that the most popularly used password is the word password, and then the next one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's actually worldwide, and
well, I would hope that government officials are not using those as their passwords.
But you see the same case. I remember once the police website was hacked some time back, and the password was password.
The password was password.
Yes.
Oh dear.
That anyone can even guess without even having any hacking knowledge.
Oh dear.
So there are so many factors which can come to play, because sometimes also you can find the government official who probably is not careful with password. Maybe you just write it somewhere.
Right.
Not to forget.
Okay, so in terms of IFMIS, this has been controversial. I mean, this is something that was supposed to promote a lot of transparency and change basically the way government procurement especially works. But when you look at the system as a whole, is this value for taxpayers' money, or is this a case of a lot of theory, but in practice things fall apart?
No, it's value. The system itself is good. If you look at it entirely, it's very good. The question is, we have the culture. So sometimes, you know, if people want to go around the system,
they will find a way.
They find a way.
Right.
So, but we have the if we can develop the culture to be, you know, transparency start with the individual, not the system. Because, you know, system is done by individuals.
Yes.
So
the system is only as good as the people who use it.
Right. Yeah. So that's the point. But in terms of the system, when we leave the human point out of it, it's good.
Okay. Your final thoughts on this, Collins?
The government is trying, and we are moving towards the right direction. But as we are moving towards digital, we need to put in mind that security is core. Without security, all just be a waste of taxpayers' money.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for joining us with those insights, gentlemen. And thank you also for keeping it simple enough for us to understand. And essentially, you're saying that as long as the will is there, we can actually get to the bottom of this case.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you for that discussion.